Chapter 10. Is there anybody there? "Is there anybody there?" whispered Lesley, anxiously scrunching up the top of the brand new wedding present duvet with both hands. I was in my pyjamas, motionless with fear, and peeking out of our small bedroom window to see what was happening at the back of the house. "I can't see anyone," I whispered tensely. It was our first night together in the house. I had woken to the sound of shouts and footsteps, but I couldn't work out how close they were. At first I lay still, trying to stop myself breathing so that I could listen for the tiniest sounds to help me to assess the level of danger. Was a burglar trying to break into our house? Was someone about to rob us of all our wedding presents? Of course, they would do very well with our new video recorder, matching kettle and toaster, an impressive collection of Ainsley Country Garden porcelain, but they would probably leave my model Dalek behind. Surely if they had any sense and professional acumen, they would have carried out a burglary while we were still thousands of miles away in Morocco, rather than upstairs in bed. After lying in bed paralysed by fear for a few minutes, I got up to investigate, accidentally waking my new wife in the process. "No, I don't see anyone," I whispered. "I think we're all right." "Are you sure?" "Yes, there's no one there." "You're scaring me," said Lesley. "I never heard much noise at night when it was just me and Jennifer here." "Sorry, I just want to be sure," I said, scanning the cat's home, the perimeter of the army base and the other side of the peace line. Nothing moved. I started to breathe normally again. It was never completely dark at the back of the house, because the huge security spotlights around the border of Girdwood Barracks cast a blurry orange glow that created quasi-daylight on even the darkest of nights. This made it impossible to achieve complete darkness in the bedroom, even with the curtains closed, but at least it was easier to see what was going on at the back of the house in the middle of the night. I opened the bedroom door, crept down the stairs and checked the front door. The telephone was in the front hall if an emergency call was required. After a few minutes of careful surveillance, I slipped back into bed and embraced my anxious wife. I prayed silently that God would protect us from harm and keep us safe until morning. "We're all right," I said, and eventually we tired of listening for fresh and suspicious noises outside. Exhaustion replaced fear, and we fell asleep in each other's arms. Little did I know that this was going to be the first of many such nights. I was constantly alert to the many threats, real, possible, and imaginary, all around us. The regular nighttime incidents would begin when I wakened with a start at some noise outside. The waking, the listening, the checking, the watching, all became routine. Normal people put their cat out every night. We checked our security. I fitted extra locks on all the windows and doors, although my limited DIY skills meant that these added security measures were unlikely to protect us from a serious attack. I had made my bed, and I was going to have to lie in it. I was a new husband, and I felt that it was my responsibility to protect my wife. A lifelong commitment to pacifism didn't equip me to win a fight to the death with an intruder with a handgun. I would have to use my head to escape any danger before coming face to face with any balaclavaed attacker. Vigilance was essential at night on Murder Mile. I had no idea whether we were in grave danger or no risk at all. Perhaps the Protestants who attacked our houses would spare us if they found out where I was from. Or maybe they would target us for the treachery of living with the other side. Perhaps the Provos had decided we were harmless Christians and off limits for a Republican attack. Or maybe they had decided we were legitimate targets for trying to persuade young people not to engage in violence. The threat to our lives was out there in the darkness, or not. I trusted God to look after us, but I was scared too. Ivan Martin and Richard Young on Downtown Radio woke me at 7:30 a.m. that first morning, and immediately I heard activity in the tiny kitchen below. When I wandered downstairs, I saw my brand new wife busily setting out brand new placemats, knives and spoons for breakfast on our brand new pine dining table. It was a long time since I had entertained the thought of a weekday breakfast. In the bedsit, I was usually so tired from working the night before that I skipped the first meal of the day, preferring an extra half hour in bed to any form of sustenance. No doubt this unhealthy habit had contributed to my suspected stomach ulcer. "Oh, I'm sorry, I won't have time for breakfast. I need to get round to the office." Lesley was walking towards me carrying a tray of fresh toast and boiled eggs. A look of disappointment crossed her face. "Are you not having a proper breakfast?" she asked, genuinely shocked that I was prepared to start the day on an empty stomach. "No, I don't really have time for breakfast, love, except at the weekends," I explained. "But I've to go to work and I'm very busy too, and I got up before you just to make it for you," replied Lesley. It was typical of Lesley to get up early, especially for me. She always went out of her way for me. This was the orderly family breakfast she had grown up with in Balaki. She felt that a good wife should make her husband a good breakfast every day, and that a good husband should sit down and eat it and appreciate it. As I kissed Lesley on the cheek before leaving the house, I noticed a look of hurt on her lovely face. I felt a pang of guilt that she was already being a better wife to me than I was being a husband to her. At lunchtime every day, we ate together. I walked home from the centre and Lesley drove back from Springmartin. Our little hatchback was getting on a bit now, but it was still running well, although starting to rust around the bottom of the doors, a problem probably brought on by our trips back up to the salty air of the beach at Port Stewart, where we had walked hand in hand as students a few years before. Some of the youth club members had kindly offered to set fire to the ageing car so that we could both claim on the insurance and get compensation from the Northern Ireland office for a Troubles-related attack, but I politely declined. I knew of very few working couples that could have lunch together nearly every day, and it was a special hour for us in the midst of our busy schedules of youth clubs, trips and funding applications. Lesley's work with young people in the Upper Shankill estates was going very well, although she had to contend with several members of the church who were outraged that she was allowing raucous teenagers to walk on holy ground through the church vestibule en route to the church hall for a game of uni-hock. Our lunchtimes together were an oasis of calm in the middle of every day. We had a snack and a chat, and we watched a new Australian soap opera called Neighbours. As the months went by, we followed the ups and downs of her young people in the Shankill, my young people in the New Lodge, and Des and Daphne, and then Scott and Charlene in Ramsay Street. After a few months, we decided we wanted another little creature to care for together. We bought a Japanese lionhead goldfish and named him Aslan in a nod to C.S. Lewis. We loved Aslan, but you couldn't cuddle a goldfish, and a baby was out of the question on the peace line. So we decided to buy a dog instead. I had a poor track record with pets with a high body count, but Lesley was good with animals. So we scoured the ads in the pets corner of the Belfast Telegraph until one day we saw a litter of wire-haired fox terriers in Ballysillan. We called the owners, made an appointment to see the pups, and fell in love with the runt of the litter, a cute little scamp with an underbite. We named her Farah, after the place where Noah was born in the Bible, because she left floods everywhere. But most people thought we'd named her after one of Charlie's Angels. We took her for walks in the waterworks and up the Cave Hill. There was drama when she came off the lead, ran onto the Antrim Road and headbutted an Ulster bus, appearing to be dead, but coming around miraculously, like Lazarus in the emergency vets on the Shankill Road. Then, on the 12th of July, she ran away on a visit to Balaki and came home with a smile on her face. She delivered a litter of puppies 8 weeks later. Our beloved pet shared our desire for good cross-community relationships. Unfortunately, one of our neighbours was a grumpy old man who hated dogs, especially Farah, who occasionally chose to slip under the fence to shit on his petunias. He complained regularly about her and referred to as your fucking mutt. One day, I received a phone call from the Shankill Leisure Centre to inform me that our dog had been found wandering in the car park, over a mile away from our house and across 2 major road junctions. I wondered how on earth Farah had managed this trek. The mystery was solved later that day when one of my youth club members turned tout and told me that he had witnessed a grumpy old man coax Farah into his car before driving off in the direction of the Shankill Road. Our neighbour had kidnapped our dog and dumped her on the other side of the peace line. We turned the other cheek, pretended nothing had happened, and offered to pay for a new fence to protect him from our fucking mutt. And we kept Farah well away from his petunias. However, after this incident, I wondered if the symbolism behind this nasty act was that my neighbour would really like to dump me back on the Shankill Road where I belonged. On our first 11th night in the house, it was very hard to get to sleep. While the bonfires lit up the sky over North Belfast, we decided to go to bed early and hope and pray for the best. The disturbed sleep that followed was inevitable. We were wakened by the sound of Farah barking and scratching at the back door. "Is there anybody there?" asked Lesley as she sat up in bed. A cat or a rat or a gunman might have disturbed Farah. At least now we had a guard dog, well, a smart, alert dog, but she punched well above her weight in terms of the noise she made. I was standing in my boxer shorts, peeking out of the bedroom window. "Is there anybody there?" repeated Lesley. Nights in our bedroom were starting to sound like a séance. I could hear the distant sound of people on the other side of the peace line singing The Sash, interspersed with closer shouts of "Kick the Pope," "Kill all Teagues," and "No Surrender." I could hear bricks and bottles landing ever closer to Bruceville Park. Our homes were the nearest and easiest targets to attack as a celebration of my culture. Perhaps the noise I'd heard was a wee hood about to throw a brick or a petrol bomb across the peace line. "I think they're all still up at the boney across the road," I whispered. "I think we're all right." Once again, after a few minutes of careful watching, I slipped back into bed and hugged Lesley, who was so used to this kind of night now that she had already fallen asleep. I prayed my usual prayer, that God would protect us from harm and keep us safe until morning. We had a regular stream of visitors to our home, although a few people declined our invitation to visit in case their car got hijacked or damaged. Some were in awe that our commitment to peace and zeal for God were such that we were prepared to come and live here, while others thought we were not near wise in the head. The young people from the youth club would call in for a chat regularly too, although we had to establish some boundaries after Lesley pointed out that I seemed to spend more time with the youth of the New Lodge than with her, and that our living room, our only room downstairs, was not a youth club. "Lads, I only want yous calling around in emergency or if we arranged it now. I'm married and all, and you're not allowed to smoke in our house, okay?" I explained to a group of the lads. "Aye, Tony thinks he's a big lad, now he's not a virgin no more," commented Soup. "Only slagging." However, when the young people called around, they were always very respectful of our home. Thieving bits and pieces from the drop-in centre was acceptable, but stealing from our home seemed to be regarded as out of bounds. That was until Lesley's glasses went missing. It was, after all, the 1980s, when glasses were big and bold. With her keen sense of fashion, Lesley had the very latest bright red plastic glasses, which she used for watching television and driving, as she was only slightly short-sighted. For months she searched for them, trying to remember where she had put them, until the day there was a rap on the front door. "Here, Tone," said Dan, his eyes shifting from side to side to check if anyone was watching, like a member of the French resistance in Allo Allo. He took a small, shiny object from his pocket and handed it to me quickly. "It's a comb from Shamey in the Crumb," he said, and ran off in an instant. Shamey was one of the occasional youth club members who was currently in prison. A comb was the term for a secret communication from a political prisoner that had been smuggled out of the prison by insertion into one of the orifices of a visitor. They were usually written on wafer-thin cigarette paper or torn off Gideon Bible pages, then rolled up and covered in foil. I opened the secret message quickly, wondering why Seamus had chosen to communicate with me in such a clandestine manner, and slightly concerned that what I was doing was unintentionally illegal. Then, when I thought of the way that calms usually made it out of the prison, I had an urge to wash my hands even more quickly. The calm from Shamey was written on a very thin piece of paper from the edge of a page of the Bible. I was doubly troubled that I was in receipt of an illegal communication, and that in spite of all our chats about God, Shamey had chosen to tear up his prison Bible to write secret messages rather than to read it to discover the message. I unfurled the tiny scroll and read, "Dear Tony, I'm sorry for stealing Lesley's glasses. I needed them for disguise. Sorry, mate. Shamey." Shamey had bright, almost fluorescent ginger hair. I wondered how he could possibly have imagined that wearing bright red women's glasses would have provided him with some sort of camouflage. The fact that the message was coming from inside the prison suggested that his disguise hadn't worked. I was annoyed that Shamey had abused our trust. We had welcomed him into our home, and he had stolen Lesley's glasses. However, I appreciated the sincere apology while washing my hands again and again for the next few hours. When I showed Lesley the contents of the message, she rejected the idea of demanding the return of her spectacles. With only one possible delivery method, she was unlikely to want to put them back on again anyway. A few weeks later, there was more furious knocking on the front door, which Lesley answered. "Let me in, Lesley, the fucking Brits are after me!" shouted an out-of-breath and red-faced Mo. "No way," said Lesley. "You're not hiding in here." "Let me fucking in, you bitch," he roared. "No way," repeated Lesley. "Hide in your own house." Lesley was braver than me. I would have let him in. Mo had no idea there was more to Lesley than fashion and fun. She was not to be underestimated. Mo looked disgusted, spat in Lesley's face, and ran off. I ran after him and eventually caught up with him at the top of the New Lodge Road. It seemed that I was having more luck in catching him than the Brits. "Take your glasses off, Tony," he said helpfully, not wanting to damage my spectacles in the street fight he was anticipating. I wanted to call Mo a cocky wee shite and give him a good slap he would never forget. But here I was, a lone pacifist on the wrong side of the peace line. I'd never struck anyone in my life, and he was a street fighter who could surely knock my melt in. I controlled my rage at him for spitting on my wife and told him he was a big disappointment and a coward for being abusive to a woman. I was shaking with rage, but I just walked off. When I returned to the house, Lesley was upset and still crying, more at the insult than the spittle. "What did you do?" she asked. I told him he was a big disappointment and a coward for being abusive to a woman. Lesley looked at me as if to say, "Is that it?" There was a line between turning the other cheek and being a doormat, and I think I was on the wrong side of the line from my spouse's perspective. A few weeks later, I was once again wakened from a light, peace-lined sleep by the sounds of bins clattering, running footsteps and shouts at the back of the house. Had someone thrown a brick or a petrol bomb at the wall of the army barracks? Was this the beginning of a mortar bomb attack? Were we about to become collateral damage? "Is there anybody there?" asked Lesley wearily as she turned over to try to get back to sleep. I could see a group of soldiers running along the back of the houses, hurdling all the fences en route to our slightly higher fence, erected to protect Farah from our neighbours' hatred of Protestant mutts. "There's a man," I said in astonishment. All these nights of checking, and there had never been anyone there before. "What?" cried Lesley. "There's a man? What do you mean there's a man? There's a man!" After nightly inquiries for months upon end, neither Lesley nor I could believe that I was answering in the affirmative. Had someone somewhere decided that we should be killed tonight? I was supposed to protect her in these circumstances, but what use was a pacifist husband if someone was attacking our house, I thought. I couldn't even react appropriately to swearing and spitting. Directly below the window, I could see the outline of a man, and I could see and hear him trying to open our back door, turning the handle and pushing the door with his shoulder. Farah was barking ferociously, and I could hear the sound of her leaping up and down on the other side of the door. Suddenly, the troop of soldiers came charging towards our backyard, and the man fled in an instant, hurtling over the rest of the fences and off towards the safety of the new lodge. I ducked down so as not to attract attention from the gun-toting soldiers. Once the commotion had passed, I went downstairs and comforted Farah with a pat and a bonio. When I returned to bed, to my surprise, Lesley started to laugh. "What are you laughing at?" I asked. "At long last, somebody was there," she replied. And we'd survived, I thought to myself, with relief.